The sun hung low over the horizon as Captain Daniel Reeves walked across the tarmac toward his aircraft, a narrow-bodied twin-engine jet waiting quietly in the soft morning light. The routine of pre-flight checks had always grounded him, giving him a sense of order and calm before taking command of a machine that would soon be carrying hundreds of lives thousands of feet above the earth. He had flown for nearly 20 years, yet every day in the cockpit still carried its own blend of responsibility and subtle excitement. He paused at the foot of the stairs leading to the jet bridge, taking a slow breath. Today's flight was a short regional haul, the sort pilots usually think of as gentle stepping stones between longer journeys. The weather was clear, winds were mild, everything suggested an easy flight. But as every pilot learns at some point, the sky has a habit of reserving the unexpected for the moments you least anticipate it. Daniel entered the cockpit where First Officer Maya Patel was already running through the system's displays. She looked up with a smile, tapping her pen on the checklist clipped to a small board. "Morning, Captain. Everything looks normal so far." He returned the smile and slid into his seat. "Normal is good. Let's keep it that way." The cockpit door closed behind them, muffling the sounds of boarding passengers. The gentle hum of avionics filled the space as Daniel and Maya moved through the pre-flight procedures with practiced efficiency. Fuel levels, hydraulic pressure, flight control surfaces, oxygen systems, navigation routes. Every switch, every light, every number mattered. A few minutes later, after clearance from ground control, they brought the engines to life. The low rumble vibrated through the fuselage. Daniel felt that familiar connection, the moment when a machine stops being off and becomes something alive, responsive, ready to trust you if you trust it back. The takeoff was smooth. The aircraft rose steadily through the layers of morning haze, and once they leveled out, Daniel eased the throttle back to cruising power. Passengers settled in, attendants began their routines, and the sky stretched ahead in a wide, empty quiet. About 20 minutes into the flight, the calm was interrupted by a faint vibration, subtle, barely noticeable, like a tremor from a passing truck. It was the kind of vibration pilots feel before anyone else does. Daniel glanced at Maya. "You feel that?" She nodded. "Engine 2 parameters just dipped a little. Might be nothing, but I'm watching it." For a few seconds, the vibration stopped. Then it came again, slightly stronger, like an unsteady heartbeat. Engine 2's temperature gauge twitched, then twitched again. Daniel made a decision instantly. "Let's notify ATC. Something's off." Maya switched frequencies. "Center, this is Flight 87 requesting priority monitoring. We're noticing minor fluctuations on our right engine." ATC responded calmly, asking them to advise if conditions changed. But before Maya could reply, a louder rumble shook the cockpit. Warning lights blinked across the panel. The right engine's readings spiked, then dropped sharply. A moment later, a dull, heavy thud reverberated through the airframe, as if something massive had coughed and fallen silent. Engine 2 had failed. Alarms filled the cockpit. The autopilot disengaged with its sharp, insistent tone. For a split second, the aircraft rolled gently to the right, asymmetrical thrust pulling it off balance. Daniel took the controls. His voice was steady, almost unnaturally calm. "I have the aircraft." "I confirm you have the aircraft," Maya responded, matching his tone even though her heart raced. She silenced the alarm and pulled up the engine failure checklist on her screen. The cabin intercom chimed. Daniel lifted the handset with one hand while keeping the other firmly on the controls. He gave the passengers a short, composed announcement, just enough information to be honest without creating fear. "A simple technical issue," he told them. "Nothing alarming. They were trained for this. They were handling it." Inside the cockpit, however, the stakes were clear. Flying with one engine is entirely possible, but it requires precision, focus, and trust in procedures. An aircraft can stay aloft, climb, descend, and land safely on a single operating engine, but only if the crew keeps a cool head and follows every step carefully. Maya read from the checklist, engine 2, confirm failure, throttle idle, throttle idle. Daniel repeated as he gently pulled it back, shut-off valve closed, fuel lines sealed, electrical loads redistributed, systems isolated. The aircraft grew quieter on the right side, the humming now uneven but stable. They now flew with only the left engine carrying the full workload. ATC came over the radio with a calm but firmer tone. Flight 87, we show loss of thrust on your starboard engine. Confirm emergency status. Daniel pressed the transmit button. Center, Flight 87, declaring an emergency. Engine 2 failure. Request vectors to nearest suitable airport. They were guided toward a mid-sized international airport roughly 80 miles away, close enough to reach quickly, large enough to handle an emergency landing comfortably. Daniel trimmed the aircraft to compensate for the asymmetric thrust. The plane wanted to pull right, but he countered with gentle rudder and a slight tilt of the yoke. It was like steering a car with one tire suddenly missing. It wasn't impossible, but it demanded constant attention. For the next 10 minutes, they flew with heightened awareness. Maya handled all communications and procedural checks, freeing Daniel to focus purely on flying. He felt each movement of the plane as if it were connected directly to his nerves. Maya called the cabin crew to the cockpit phone. We're preparing for an emergency landing. Situation is stable. Follow standard procedures and make sure passengers are ready. The cabin crew responded with professionalism. They had drills for this too, even if they hoped never to use them. As the airport came into view through the thin layer of clouds, Daniel felt a subtle release of tension. The runway stretched ahead like a promise. Still, the landing required accuracy. Single-engine approaches leave less room for error, less margin to correct, and a greater need for smooth coordination. Flaps to 1, he said. Flaps 1. Maya confirmed. The aircraft descended steadily, guided both by instrument readings and Daniel's intuition shaped by years of experience. He managed the power carefully. The remaining engine's thrust was sensitive now, and any abrupt change could destabilize the approach. Wind light from the west, runway 27 cleared to land, the tower instructed. Daniel acknowledged they were committed. The runway grew larger in the windshield. The aircraft aligned perfectly with the centerline. Daniel kept one hand on the yoke, the other resting lightly on the throttle of the remaining engine. Even small adjustments mattered. At about 200 feet, Maya noticed the nose drifting a tiny fraction right. Little right yaw. I see it, Daniel said, applying smooth rudder to correct. At 100 feet, the aircraft drifted slightly below the glide slope. He added a touch more power. At 50 feet, he pulled back gently, guiding the plane into the flare. The landing gear touched down firmly but safely. The aircraft rolled down the runway, decelerating under Daniel's guidance. Reverse thrust came only from the left side, so he compensated with rudder to keep the aircraft straight. Within moments, they slowed to taxi speed. Maya exhaled sharply, releasing tension she hadn't realized she was holding. We made it, Daniel nodded, steady and quiet. Good teamwork. The aircraft came to a complete stop on an auxiliary taxiway where emergency vehicles surrounded them. Out of caution, the crew kept passengers on board until ground teams verified that everything was safe. Then they deplaned calmly through the main door. Reporters later said the passengers looked more surprised than terrified. Many didn't even fully understand how serious the situation had been. The crew had kept the atmosphere controlled, the communication clear, and the experience as calm as possible. Inside the airport terminal, after debriefing with airline officials and emergency staff, Daniel finally sat down in a quiet room. The adrenaline faded, leaving only exhaustion and relief. He stared at his hands. They were steady now, but he remembered every moment of that 10-minute descent. A safety investigator entered the room with a gentle nod. You handled everything by the book, Captain. Textbook engine failure response. Daniel gave a tired smile. We train for it, but you never know how it'll feel when it actually happens. How did it feel? He paused, choosing his words carefully. Focused. That's the best way I can describe it. Everything else disappeared. Just the plane, the instruments, the noise of the one engine still alive. And fear. He considered that too. Fear comes after, not during. During, you follow the steps. You trust your training, your co-pilot, the aircraft. Everything else waits. Later that evening, as news channels quietly reported the incident, aviation experts praised the crew's discipline and clear thinking. Viewers heard simple explanations about how modern aircraft are built to fly efficiently on one engine, and how disaster is prevented by skill, teamwork, and preparation rather than luck. For Daniel, it wasn't heroism. It was professionalism. He remembered the vibration, the sudden thud, the warning lights. He remembered the passengers trusting him without ever seeing him. He remembered Maya reading checklists with precise calm. He remembered the runway rising to meet the aircraft, the wheels kissing the pavement, the long exhale afterward. He knew that flying always carried risks, but he also knew that every risk could be managed with training, discipline, and composure. A week later, after mandatory rest and evaluation, Daniel returned to flying. Some pilots take longer breaks after incidents, but for him, returning to the sky felt natural. The cockpit was where he belonged. The routine steadied him again, the switches, the checklists, the hum of engines waking up. Maya met him at the jet bridge with a playful grin, ready to try this again, preferably with 2 engines this time. He laughed. 2 would be nice, but he also knew something deeper. Even if the unexpected came again, he could handle it, not because he was fearless, but because he was prepared. As he settled into the captain's seat, he felt that same quiet sense of purpose. The sky would always hold surprises, but he would meet them, not with panic, but with skill, calm, and the understanding that every moment in flight depends on choices made with clarity. For the passengers boarding behind him, this would be another ordinary flight. For Daniel, it was another chance to honor the responsibility he carried. And for anyone who ever wondered how a pilot survives a critical mid-air engine failure, the answer was simple: by trusting training, staying calm, working as a team, and guiding the aircraft, steady and controlled, back to the ground. Because sometimes the difference between danger and safety is nothing more than a quiet voice in a cockpit saying, "I have the aircraft," and meaning it with every part of themselves.